And when you become better, then you change the stuff around you, because the way they affect you is not the same. You don't get all bogged down with the pigeons and the turkeys. You don't scavenge around on the ground looking for your solutions. You look up. You look up. And not only do you look up, as eagles, you should fly up. Because only up are you above your circumstances. And then you can step back and look down on them and say, okay, I can do that, do that, do that. You know how when you see it all, you can start moving stuff into place? And God starts giving you guidance on, okay, ignore that one over there, but this is one over here I want you to handle, or this situation, or this job, or this, or this, that. Because when you close up on it, you can't really see all the details. You can't really see all of the little things that you might have to deal with because you're too involved and too close on it. But when you step back and take a good, long, objective look, you start seeing stuff you didn't see when you were close up. Well, can you only imagine that when you're 10,000 feet up looking down on all this madness? It all looks like little ants to you 10,000 feet up. It looks insignificant to you 10,000 feet up. It looks like, why am I even upset 10,000 feet up? Why am I bothered 10,000 feet up? Our perspective changes when we're twisted up in Him. Because He has promised that we will rise up.
Amen.
So if we're not rising up above our circumstances, that means we've made the choice not to rise. Which means we're not bound up in Him, because if you're bound up in Him, you can't help but rise, because He's rising. And if you twist it all up and bound all up in Him, you're going to rise in spite of yourself. But if you're not, if you're just hanging out with the people who are twisted up, but you're not really twisted yourself, you're just kind of in the neighborhood, they will rise. And they will leave you on the ground. Now, a lot of times we talk about pigeons and turkeys, but it occurred to me that chickens have issues. Have you noticed, how many of you have been in farms that have chickens? Where do the chickens look the majority of the time? On the ground. They walk around pecking like this almost. I mean, they rarely look up. They look up every once in a while, but usually they're looking down. So if you have a choice between roaming around with some chickens and scavenging on the ground with some pigeons, and rarely and can't even hardly fly with some turkeys, or rising high with our Lord, which will you choose? Okay, I'm going to try that one more time. If you have a choice between the chickens, the turkeys, and the pigeons, or rising high with our Lord, which will you choose? Thank you. I'm so glad you said that. Because only then are we really in tune with what's happening when we are waiting or being bound up or twisted in Him. We're not sitting around and just, checking out things and wondering when God's going to do something. We're doing the very last thing He instructed us to do, whatever that was. If He told you to go pick up somebody to take them to the hospital, well, if that's your job, you do that until He tells you it's not time for you, you should stop. If your job is to sing, you sing until He tells you to stop. If your job is to preach, you preach until He tells you to stop. If your job is to cook for a whole bunch of people, you do that until He tells you to stop. And when He gives you a new instruction, you do that until He tells you to stop. This waiting thing, the wait is a verb, that its tense is imperfect, which means it started and it has no end on it. He didn't give an end. So we don't know, it'll end sometime in the future, but we don't know when. So we don't know when, it's safe to say, could be eternally, that the end of time, it ends. So once you're bound up with him, it's an everlasting kind of thing. So people who stop being bound up with him, my question is, were you ever? I'm going to stand over here. This is my husband. When we walk around with our head down like chickens, are we trying to pull loose from him who we're bound to? When we're walking around scavenging like pigeons, are we trying to break loose? Or are we, when we try to fly on our own like turkeys, are we trying to break loose? Or do we just not know who we're bound to so we can stay bound? I asked you initially, how do you know you're eagles, or why you know you're eagles? And the reason I ask the question is sometimes we get so caught up in our religiosity. We get caught up in the duties of the church, and there's nothing wrong with the duties of the church. Don't get me wrong, we have to do the business of the church. But sometimes we get caught up in all those things, we forget why we even started this journey in the first place. We forget the person that we said we were worshiping in the first place. We forget who he is. And when we forget who he is, we start seeing things through our eyes, not his eyes. When we look through his eyes, we see all the possibilities. When we look through his eyes, we look from a vantage point that we can't see from ours. When we look through his eyes, he promised that we will not be caught unaware. So that spirit of discernment, he's letting us see what is about to come, what has come, who we're dealing with. And we don't have to deal with a lot of the circumstances and people and their issues that we end up in because we're looking from our perspective, not his. When we remember that he was the one who told the waters to stop. Up right there, that's it. The land starts right here. Now I don't want you to come up on it any further. When he told the planets, you're going to stay in this orbit until I take you out. When he told us to be fruitful and multiply and handle this earth, he didn't put a stop on that. He didn't say until you get tired. He didn't say until you felt like, okay, God, that's enough. They don't need no more. He said, you go do what I told you to do, and you do it till I tell you to stop. And when you get discouraged, I'm there to renew you. When you get tired, I'm there to renew you. When you get exhausted, I'm there to renew you. When you get angry and don't want to be bothered, I'm there to renew you. And trust me, I've had some angry, don't want to be bothered days. And he's there all the time to renew me. That's the only way I could keep going is he renews me. He renews my mind. There's a reason Paul was admonished to tell us to renew our mind. Because how we think dictates how we act. Yes. And we got a choice. We can think like us, and we know how much trouble that gets into. Or we can think like him. Yes. But only can we think like him if we know who he is. Yes. Now, I don't know about all these other folks and their God. I really don't. But I know my God created it, is holding it together, put it all in place, and he loves me enough to let me enjoy it. And he loves me enough to keep me together while I'm enjoying it. And he loves me enough to let me fly high like an eagle. If I stay bound to him and his word, I can fly high. So can you fly? Do you believe you can fly? Can you fly high? Are you going to let, and I don't know what any of you are facing when you go home today, but I can almost guarantee you that you who work outside the home, you're going to be facing something tomorrow. It might be traffic, might be crowded airports, might be people acting crazy on the job, something is going to be in your way. And your choice is, do I rise above it and look from the perspective of my God to how I can make this work for me? Or are you going to look at it like the chickens and the turkeys and the pigeons to see how I'm going to be upset, depressed, and frustrated? And for those of us who are not outside the home, our families will be waiting. Somebody in the families will act up sometime tomorrow. And so the perspective you have on that will be as you see it, or will you rise above it and see it from his perspective and smile and say, okay, God, I know you got this, you're going to show me how to deal with this, so they will be blessed and I won't be stressed. It's perspective, his. And so do you know why you fly high now? I mean, is it a little bit better than before? If I say, why do you fly? Why do you fly? See, there you go. Why? You fly high because you are bound and twisted up in your God. And your God is the creator of the universe. And he is the one who is taking you higher. He didn't say, I'm going to make you an eagle. He said, I'm going to let you rise up like you got those kind of wings. And we take that on so we can remember what that bird is like and its characteristics, so we can remember how we're supposed to do that. But he said, I'm going to have you mount up like you had those wings, so you can rise up even if you don't even raise your arm, because that's who your God is and how bad he is. He can just have you rise on above that circumstance to where it looks